Hey everybody, welcome to The Early Edge, a mentorship podcast for next generation leaders where we share insights we wish we had learned earlier in our careers.
We want to equip you to learn more, grow faster, and thrive in both your work and personal life. I'm Jay.
And I'm Jeff. Let's get into today's episode.
Welcome back to the Early Edge Mentorship Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that is a bit near and dear to my heart. And I imagine as we get into it, most people can identify with some version of it, and that's imposter syndrome. And instead of Jeff and I pontificating about that, we'll certainly share our own stories. We brought a very special guest to join us on the podcast. This is a dude who I've known, let's just be honest, since diaper days. a brother from another mother. Our friend Thom Gruhler is joining us, and monumentally, our first guest in studio. Pretty big deal.
It is. It's interesting to see the whole setup here.
Well done.
Yeah.
Nice job.
I have to say, I'm impressed.
Thank you.
Not only by the podcast, but by the quality of the studio and the production value.
It's helping our brand. So the topic we're going to get into is imposter syndrome. And that's just the notion that all of us carry an inner voice that tells us if they found out what I don't know, or hey, if they found out I'm pretending that I know, it's not going to go well for me. Thom and I have journeyed together professionally. We've served clients together. We've worked together as partners in an advertising space. We've worked together as consultants. So I've seen him navigate this world wonderfully. And instead of me trying to explain his story, I'm going to let him introduce himself professionally as if we didn't know each other, and then maybe share a story where imposter syndrome hit home.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jeff, for having me. And I'm happy to talk about this topic because it's near and dear to my heart. I am maybe the biggest imposter of all. Even though I've had success, I have often felt like I was always failing, which is one of the markers of imposter syndrome. But let me tell you a little bit about my story. I started in marketing and have always been in marketing and love the marketing discipline. So everything that I have done in my professional life and even before was geared towards this idea of taking creative expression and using it for commercial outcome. And I've really enjoyed my career in doing that. I started early days with advertising with you, Jay, as you mentioned. Worked on the agency side, went to Manhattan, and was, from early in my career, always on this, like, I'm going to get a bigger job track. And maybe important to note that I came from nothing. You know, the nickels needed to be scraped together to warm the house kind of old stories. And so I felt I need to make up for that. And I also was just always looking for a big job. And when you get a big job, sometimes you get pressure with that big job, and it really forces you to do things that lead to imposter syndrome, which I guess we'll unpack. From the advertising world, and after I was in Manhattan, I ended up going client side and became the chief marketing officer, one of the three chief marketing officers at Microsoft Corporation. I was leading, my chief marketing officer leads the entire marketing discipline, so not just the advertising, which you did on the agency side, but also the product marketing, all the go-to-market, pricing, business strategy, and supporting, of course, the sales organization. So it was a pretty big pivot. And as the CMO at Microsoft, I learned firsthand what imposter syndrome really means and what it can do to you, your family, and also your career. So since I left Microsoft, I went and started my own company. We're in the marketing space, focused on technology and data in the marketing space. And I work with CMOs pretty much day in and day out. And it's funny, as a CMO and now, in a sense, supporting CMOs, how much of my own personal experience I want to bring to the struggles that I see these CMOs facing. And you don't often, as an outside advisor, get the chance to offer advice, but that's this is maybe a chance to do that in a sense.
Yeah. Well, let's set the stage because I know you're going to talk about your Microsoft days.
Yeah.
Give our audience an understanding of the time at Microsoft, what was happening around the phone, because many of our audience may not know that Microsoft launched a phone.
Yeah.
So can you set the stage for what was happening, talk about the phone, when you entered the picture, and so we understand the context of how you experienced this stuff?
So, I joined Microsoft, and I think it was 2011 when I joined Microsoft, and booming, obviously fast growing in all of the ways that you could measure a technology company that was fast growing. One area where they weren't fast growing was in mobile devices. Mm-hmm. They had famously said no to the iPhone and dismissed it even, and mobile devices, mobile compute was not on their radar. Well, in that period of time, Steve Ballmer and his team were really focused on, hey, we're going to change this. And they have, I think, successfully. But this was one of the first entries into making a difference in mobile compute, and they were going to launch a phone. Well, they called Microsoft called Verizon, and at the time when I was in the agency business, Verizon was my client, and the CEO of Verizon was like, oh, you're looking for a marketing guy who knows the carrier space. You should look at our agency guy, Thom Gruhler. He would be great. He knows the carrier channel. He knows what phones sell and what don't sell, and he's you're going to love him. He's going to be great. So after a long story of interviews or whatever, I ended up at Microsoft, and it was quite clear that the phone was an important entry for Steve himself, and he had put a brilliant team of young engineers on this product, and it was a incubation, I guess, is probably the best way to describe it, but it was more than that. In the context of Microsoft, it was like, we are finally going to get this right, and you're going to do it, or you're going to help us do it. Right?
Was the phone in the market when you joined, or was it pre-market in product development?
Pre-market and product development, yeah.
Okay. So maybe, if you don't mind, and Jeff, chime in, because I know you know the space as well. Kind of explain from idea to market all the things that have to happen, so our listeners can kind of understand the technology product development life cycle, for lack of a better term.
Well, I think the most critical change for me, from coming from the advertising side, when the product's in market and you just kind of have to build the last mile, let's call it, of the go-to-market, the process really in technology and bringing a product to market actually starts with a significant amount of research, understanding the category and the customer, understanding what we can build in a market that's fairly well entrenched, that will delight a customer. And that was really all-consuming for this Microsoft team. And I have to say, the team of engineers, including the leader of the team, Terry Myerson, who I spoke to just the other day, was probably the most satisfying group of people I ever worked with. Very, very smart, very committed and passionate, and very dedicated to building the best product that they could. And there was a lot of research that we did. And we actually built a product that fit in the market in a new way. And you'll if you're interested in tech, you can go back and go look at all of the marketing that we did and the phone itself, because they're not out there for sale anymore. But it was built around this organized system of tiles on the phone screen, which brought to you all the things you cared about. You could program these tiles, and instead of having just app logos on the phone, it was the things that you curated to be the entry points. And they would collect the apps, but it would be the entry point of the things that cared about you the most. And we were all kind of bought in there. So was the consumer. The carrier channel really wanted the phone to work because there was a need for a third competitor, and we can go into those dynamics between Google and Apple at the time, but they really wanted Microsoft to win in this space. So there was a lot of work done. I came in, Jay, probably, I would say around the time that the phone was ready to show the carriers. They had done product dev, and prototype build, and they were ready to show it to carriers. And then we were going to go build, and we went to China and build them, and so on.
Pre-revenue.
Yeah, and a lot of what I hear you talking about was developing value prop positioning, because at that point, I believe the iPhone was, iPhone 3, 4, yep. I can't remember exactly. It's a little while ago, but I would imagine a lot of that was, we talk in marketing circles a lot about positioning and value prop. For those that maybe younger listeners that aren't familiar with value prop, that's how you want to be perceived by those you seek to motivate. And sometimes we'll talk about clear, credible, compelling, and unique. And I'm sure that was a lot of the thinking at the time, was how do we make this phone different from what else is out there?
Yeah.
So I love the setup. And remember, we're talking about imposter syndrome. The environment is that you walked into, I think, you have a bunch of smart people, a really important thing, a very public launch, and you're responsible for all the things after the product gets built. How'd you feel?
Well, obviously I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I think probably the more accurate description is I was afraid to fail. And you have to look at the psychology of who I am and my career history. But all of these big jobs I had before, I thought, okay, this is it. I'm ready for this job. Proved to be not ready, and scarily I hung on and somehow succeeded. And then this was the biggest thing maybe that I'd ever taken on, and a big shift. And so I was scared. And I was like, I don't want to let these guys down. I don't want to let my family and friends down. I don't want to let myself down. I don't want to interrupt my career. And there was a lot on me. Now, at the same time, and this is, I think, true of imposter syndrome, what I projected was, I got this. Like, I am the man with the plan. And didn't find an outlet for what if you really knew. I love the way you framed it in the beginning. If you really knew what I don't know, you'd throw me out of the room. But I had no outlet for that. So I really was stuck in this private fear, but public confidence.
That's such a powerful phrase, and it's hitting me personally because I know the private fear, public confidence. I mean that connects. Jeff, what about you? Does that connect with you?
It does. I'll give you one example from early in my career where I was in a marketing role. I was in a bit of a marketing and product strategy role, and we were launching the first web-based solution that this billion-dollar organization was rolling out. And from a product strategy standpoint and a rollout standpoint, I felt like I really was over my ski tips. I had a team, and I just was a little bit of deer in the headlights because we had a very big launch for a very big company, and we were at the kind of tip of the spear for this company with new web-based technology. This is going back, 30 years. And so, I felt like an imposter. I felt like I was having to fake it until you make it. Looking back, I think there's some healthy aspects of that mindset, but there's some dangers of that aspect of that mindset. And so, Tom, I'd love to get, your perspective, because I'm sure in that moment in time where you were leading that team for a very big launch for Microsoft, your perspective and mindset there, some of that is kind of healthy, but some of it is, boy, I better communicate and fill in some areas where I might need some help, whether that's with people or learning or so tell us about the mindset and how you navigated that over the coming months and years.
Well, I love the way you frame that, because it's 100% true that I was ready for the job, fit for the job, and that it was a risk, quote unquote, worth taking, meaning I had to jump in, right? It was an unbelievable chance to go in and do something new. And so there's no part of my recounting of that in my own head where I think, I shouldn't have taken the job. I wasn't ready. But what I do regret was the mindset, as you said, or the perceptive shift that I wish I could tell myself to make back then, which was give yourself permission to say, boy, these are the things I'm feeling to somebody. It doesn't have to be to your boss, right? But to say, these are the things I'm feeling, and to be able to check in with that, even look at it when it's out there and outside of you in a way, and say, that's not healthy. It's not going to serve me. It's not going to help me. Because if you keep them inside, and you know this because of what you guys talk about here on this show, if you keep it inside, it's going to chew you up, and it's going to eat you up, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And anytime someone offers you a criticism as an imposter syndrome, right, you go like, there it is. Oh, yeah. I'm not doing the job. I'm not convincing you.
And we often, when we're in the imposter mindset, when we get challenge or criticism, even if done constructively and for the right reasons, the wall goes up, man. And the fists come up, or the walls go up, or in my case, I would retreat. I would be defensive, but by withdrawing. And it just sort of is like a double down on the lie.
Yeah.
And the damage there's a ripple effect of the damage when you already have enough of an argument going on internally. When that just gets piled on top of it, there are consequences. So what specific consequences did you experience personally, professionally? And then soon we're going to get to, so what do we do differently?
Yeah. So the consequences, it's a great question. I think maybe the biggest, most visible consequence was the way I came off as a leader to my peers, to my managers, and to my team. Because I needed to project such strength and knowledge and intelligence, and you're talking about a company that is really built on a history of being the smartest person in the room, right? So you add that to the mix that you described, and it can be pretty hard to say, oh, wait, I don't know.
Yeah.
So the consequence was people said, hey, you're not taking criticism well. You're not listening to my ideas, because every time I bring something that you might have missed to the table, you slam it.
Oh, yeah.
Because you need it to be right. For some reason, we don't know. Because remember, when you're in imposter syndrome, no one sees the story going on inside of you.
Yeah.
They only see, like, this is a smart guy. Like, he's should be here, and he's got smart things to say, and I want to learn. I'm ready to learn. And then smack. So a lot of feedback was, hey, you're really shutting me down, and you're shutting us down, and you're not really listening. And that created a lot of disconnect. The other consequence for me personally was it prevented me from taking the input of a team and make anything I was doing stronger. By, you know, when you're in a team and you're collaborating, people bring ideas, you go, yes, and yes, and yes, and I was like, no way.
Good.
And so the team was not able to be greater than me. Not because I wanted to be the greatest guy in the room, but because I was afraid that I was a nobody or that I wasn't smart enough.
Yeah. So good.
What I love there is I hear, because a lot of people in positions like that are confident. And so there's a confidence there. And there's also a balance, though, with vulnerability. And a lot of people that I work with, or some teams that I will end up coaching, they have, especially those on the team that are confident, have a hard time with the vulnerability part.
Yep.
And they don't want to let others know that they don't know.
Yeah.
And so it's balancing that.
I think, and I'm just processing this out loud, there's certainly the why don't I want others to know, there's the imposter syndrome. Is there any part of that's pride and ego, or do they all sort of end up at fear and imposter syndrome?
You know, something Jeff said reminded me of conversations I'm having now with CMOs, and there are some probably very real external forces, certainly true in marketing, but probably true in almost any company dynamic, that will create fear, that are genuinely creating a sense where we don't know as a company. And in marketing, you have an explosion of tools and data changing consumer media habits, buying habits, and it's creating even the pandemic created giant shifts in the way marketing gets done successfully. And I wish that I could go back to myself and say, you have permission to say, I don't know. I don't know. And I don't know yet is probably the best answer, which is, here's what I'm going to do to find out.
Yeah, because if you're in a big job and you keep telling your boss, I don't know, that eventually won't go well.
Correct.
But I like what you said, which is, I don't know yet. So is that sort of the first bit of guidance you give to the people you're coaching now on mindset, which is give yourself permission to acknowledge when you don't know and be ready to then go get it, right? So you can't lose your professional responsibility, but how do you navigate the transparency?
Well, I mean, you have hit what I think is the biggest nail on the head for CMOs. Think about CMOs today. The tenure for chief marketing officers under 24 months. It's the lowest tenure of anyone in the C-suite. So turnover is ginormous. And the expectation on the CMO is growing daily to say, we have got to grow. You have got to build a market for us. And you have all this data and technology available to you. And we brought you here. And so many CMOs get recruited because they were successful at company A. They get brought to company B, and everyone's like, oh, here he is. Let's go. I can't wait to see, because we finally, right? And so from the very beginning, you're stuck, right? There's an old adage we were talking about before the podcast, Henry Ford's statement around marketing, like 50% of it works. I just don't know which 50%. So there's a history with marketing being about learning. But yet what has happened today is that CMOs, they say, no, my tenure's low. I got to prove it. I got to say. So how do you do it? I think from the very beginning, you have to set the expectation that here is what we know works, and here is what we don't know, and here's what we're going to do to solve that problem. And as a CMO coming in on day one, or probably anybody in any leadership position, to be able to ascertain from the team, what do we know that works? What can we look at objectively that works? And then what do we don't know? And then what are we going to do to try to close that gap, the speed to learning? Yeah. Which inherently is an I don't know statement.
Yeah. What I was going to say that is, in that expectation setting, there is an acknowledgement, a commitment to the idea that there will always be things we don't know.
Yeah.
We will always have gaps. And so there isn't one expert with 100% of the answers. And I like when you talk about, yes and learning. It's this plus we're going to bolt on what you brought, then we're going to bolt on what you brought. This collaboration idea, which just is an implication and acknowledgement. We're always going to be working on getting better with an absence of everything we need.
Yeah. And a reminder, I know we've said it a couple of times, it probably doesn't hurt to remind again, is be willing to say you don't know. Think about whether you're that highly confident person that when you don't know, do you fake it, do you make it, do you lie, do you make stuff up? There's a group that's
great.
Just kind of presses forward with things that are dangerous. Those are very dangerous. And the other personal or persona that we see a lot is the one that shuts down. Jay, you mentioned it earlier.
Yep.
And they just get quiet. They stop collaborating.
Yep.
They stop taking risks. And so find your mentor, find your accountability partner, as you said, Thom, and open up to them. Also, don't stop trying and learning and failing, because that's where you're going to learn the most.
Yeah.
So don't shut down and stop trying.
The more you don't know, the more you have to experiment and try. And the more that you can do that planfully and with the buy-in maybe of your team and your manager, the better off you're going to be. And you can confidently say, like, we don't know, but here's exactly what we're going to do to find out. Here's the results we think we're going to get, and I'll report back as to what we've learned. And that vulnerability, I love the word you used earlier, that vulnerability to say, I don't know, has got to be followed with a plan that says, here's how we're going to try to know more than we know now. And so it's not about experimenting, dropping back, doing only what that works, right? It's about pushing forward to say, no, here's where we don't know, here's what we're going to do, and here's why it's going to be smart. There's always been in marketing, and you know this because you've been around it as long as I have, experimentation, A/B testing, you were trialing new copy or new content or new images. I'm not really talking about experimentation. I'm talking about systematically learning on real, practical business challenges that are material to the outcomes you're trying to drive or held accountable to drive. And that takes real courage. Experimentation is sort of like a nice to have 10% of my budget or whatever it is. I'm talking about something different, which is we're planfully and strategically going to be investing in knowledge the organization will grab, use, and take forward.
I want to, Thom, pick your brain a little bit. Now you're, as you're serving clients in multiple organizations, you're seeing different cultures. If you, as the CMO of Microsoft, could go back in time and establish the ideal culture for this, where everybody knows the rules of engagement are, we're transparent, we're always learning, there's always some that we don't know. So what are the pieces of the best cultures you are seeing, or what would you build if you were building a culture in the organization where people can uncover the imposter syndrome and live it out loud?
Well, the ironic thing is in technology now, maybe more than ever with the introduction of AI and the explosion really of what machines can do to drive new learning. The ironic thing is that there is now a broad acceptance that we don't know and we're going to learn. And there's a lot of experimentation happening and a lot of people who are literally deployed to just trial things. But back then, the culture of moving out of the smartest person in the room, moving out of the declarative intelligence and, grabbing the growth mindset and saying organizationally in a team or any dynamic to say, boy, I'm going to put it down. I'm going to kneel down and say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And yet I'm going to be confident, smart, and knowledgeable enough to have a plan that says, here are the things we're going to do. And I'll bring it back to you and we'll show you the knowledge we got. And then we'll deploy that. But, more often that I see, even in today's world, there are so many defaults to what I can do, what I know works, what I did at my last company. And I'm going to stick with that. And it really kind of hampers any kind of growth. Right?
Yeah. So fixed mindset kind of in that world. And, we're senior level business folks. So we're thinking from the terms of senior leadership. And yes, the leader sets that tone. So how that leader lives vulnerably, shares their own imposter syndrome, makes it okay for their directs to speak freely about what they don't know. That's great. If I'm a frontline person or I'm in my first role, can I, even in the interview process, test whether this culture is a place where I can be fully transparent?
Yeah. Boy, there's so much to unpack with that, Jay. In technology, oftentimes the young people who are coming into a job actually have more practical knowledge of what technology can do than a more dyed-in-the-wool senior executive that's been in career for 30 years. Yet, in some cultures, that's never really drawn upon.
Correct.
And so, yes, I think you want to know very quickly, if you're coming into an organization, how comfortable are you, boss, not knowing? And,
great question to ask.
We can do a whole podcast on that.
All right, we'll save that for a follow-up, and let's start heading into our key takeaways.
And maybe as we transition into key takeaways, for that listener that's in their 20s and 30s that says, wow, that imposter syndrome, I've never heard the term, but that's me. And I'm not really sure what my boss thinks of the things that I may not know. There's clearly a lot that I don't know, and I'm on a team where I feel like everybody else knows more than I do. What does a 30-second or 60-second modeled conversation look like with that person and their boss? Can you maybe just give us an example of what that conversation should sound like?
Yeah. Just extemporaneously. If you take people that I've mentored who are in a do-as-directed job and want to be successful, but see something that this boss doesn't see, right? Let's just take that scenario where, boy, boss, you've got this objective, the board or the CEO is holding you accountable. We're struggling as a team to get there. Even though you've directed me elsewhere, I've got an idea that I think will be good for us or will help us get there. Well, the thing you have to do, I think, is to put yourself in the shoes of your imposter syndrome boss, assuming maybe that's the case, but not always the case, and say, here's a construct we're going to bring behind the idea. So not only do I have an idea, but here's a measurement or a speed to learning, a construct that I can bring. And here's a hypothesis about what I think it'll deliver for us. And then here's how we can measure that. I almost can guarantee you, if you brought that to a boss and just didn't say, here's the idea, but said, here's the idea, here's why I think it'll work, here's how I think we can learn, and work with me now, boss, to say, how do we measure it and what resources can we grab? I think almost always that would be well accepted, honestly.
I love that.
All right, ready for key takeaways?
Absolutely.
I just want everyone to know that everyone has some version of the imposter voice at some case. I'm starting a new job, I'm meeting new friends, I'm joining a new team, I'm going to a new church. Everyone has a version of it. You are not alone in this voice. Nobody knows it all. Nobody.
Yeah, maybe even doubling down on that. If you are rising in your career and you're fast moving and grabbing, or even if you're ambitious, but you're grabbing new jobs and moving up the ladder or whatever it is, which everyone aspires to do, you will have it even more.
Yes.
It's a guarantee.
Oh, good.
And so it by itself or in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's what do I do? Finding an accountability partner, seeing it in myself, pulling it apart, knowing it's a lie. How do I unpack it and not let it get in my way?
Yeah,
and
great.
maybe even use it for advancement.
Yeah, great.
Another one is start to collaborate with somebody that's a peer to you first. If you're a little nervous about going up the ladder, go to a peer that you trust and you've built a relationship with, because the more that your team collaborates on this topic and the more you realize that, wow, he's a bit of an imposter, she's a bit of an imposter, we've collaborated on it. Not only will you be more comfortable, but the team will be better because now you are learning the strengths and weaknesses and learning gaps or knowledge gaps on the team.
Yeah. And building each other, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I could say being involved with teams that have total transparency, there's such freedom when you have nothing to hide. And you can get a whole lot of cool stuff done with a bunch of people who are really smart and know a lot of things, but don't pretend they know everything.
I will say I learned a good deal about that from dialogue I've had with you over the years of being able to be curious and vulnerable and weak when you're expected to be strong and knowledgeable and intelligent. And what that does to reverse your team around you going like, wow, this is a new approach. Like, okay, we can all be vulnerable and curious, and we can all fail together in the attempt to get to where we want to get to.
Yeah. Amen. That's awesome. That sounds like the early edge for the week. Thanks, Thom, for being here. It's just a gift to be around you and have you share your stuff. Thanks for giving it to us. It was great.
Thom, thanks for the insight.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to The Early Edge, a mentorship podcast for next generation leaders. If you have feedback or would like to submit questions or a topic idea, email us at earlyedge@reddogadvisors.com
or earlyedge@altaimpact.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please follow, subscribe, rate, and review. See you next time.